Today's Joe Baker's Remedy Report. We're going to have some great, interesting conversations here. We've got some guests here. We've got Action Allen from Telegram and Douglas Joseph, uh, and we've got Ken. And we're going to be talking about um, like your birth date. Like it's not if you look at carefully at the birth certificate, there's more than one date listed there, and we're going to talk about how that can be used as a monkey wrench sort of thing in the system when the system's coming against you as a defense. Um, Welcome everybody. Douglas has a great story to tell too, and uh, I think we're going to hear about his thing about cutting off one of those ankle bracelets and sending it back. And it's a bold move. But his Action Allen up there will tell us that this is all voluntary. The way governments, the U.S. Supreme Court Justice who said that. So let's. Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Alan, you're the one who proposed, I think, this meeting, where you reached out to me about it. Won't you tell us give us a little introduction about Doug?
Sure. Yeah, Doug and I we've been talking for a while. He's been dealing with this court matter. He spent some time in jail, 200 and something days. Uh, he got out, and they continued on with, trying to railroad him. And he was scheduled, I believe it was for a trial. It was a court date that he was scheduled for. And I've been telling him all along that everything is voluntary consent. And do you want to volunteer to participate in their fraud? And he got to thinking about it and finally decided, hell no, I'm done. I ain't participating no more. And so he cut the ankle monitor off and the phone that they provided him to call in, to check in and stuff. He sent both of them back. And basically sending the message that I don't wish to participate in your fraud anymore. Yeah, it was a bold move, and he's the only one that I know that has done this. And I think I kind of coaxed him along. I don't know, because he finally decided he didn't want to participate in their fraud no more. All right. But Ken was instrumental also, to let him know that you don't want to go in there, and told him, just call and tell, to let him know. Well, I'll let Doug explain all that to you. But
Yeah.
basically, yeah, he made a bold move, and a bail bondsman was involved in the matter, and everything has turned out just hunky dory for Douglas. All right, everything is real cool, and I'm very excited for him, and because, like I said, I don't know anybody. He's the only one that I know that has done this. Okay, and I've dealt with a lot of people. I've talked with a lot of people, and have dealt with a lot of people doing their USPTO filings and stuff, right? And so,
U.S. Patent Office, right? The service mark.
yes, the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I've done a lot of USPTO filings. I've dealt with a lot of people. I've give a lot of so-called advice to people. I let people know all the time, constantly. Everything is voluntary consent. So, do you want to volunteer to participate in their fraud, or do you not? It's up to you. Most everyone, just about everyone, participates in their fraud, and they get fucked every time. All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Douglas made the bold move to cut the ankle monitor off, send it back in with the phone, and basically sending them the message that I'm not participating in your fraud no more. I'm done. All right. And so I think it's cool. I think it's cool as hell.
Yeah.
And let him explain all the rest. All right.
Thanks, Alan. Doug,
Yeah.
welcome to the show, and thank you for. We've had some maybe an hour or two that we've all spoken, or you, I, and Alan, and so I'm really intrigued by your work, and you know what motivated you, I think, to get into working out these things, uh,
Well,
diving
that's
deeper and learning about some of this information.
well, that's a good question. I was my background is finance. I did go to college, but my degree is in sports medicine and exercise physiology, which has nothing to do with finance. When I graduated from college, I was looking for a job, and this was in 1980, and we were going. That was a recessionary period, high inflation, and of course, I didn't know anything about that stuff. I hadn't studied finance, but I ended up getting into sales, and it looks like my picture has frozen. Can you?
It has. In fact, I'm trying to think of what I'll do. Jeff is listening. I'm just going to mute his video for now. Wait, that's my video. We may be
Too much
using more bandwidth
Yeah.
altogether than we all have, and
Yeah, you can move my cam too.
okay, I did. I think I did. You know, things in the background like virus scanners or background backup jobs can cause some of this problem. We'll just press on. Um,
All right.
At least we
Okay.
have a picture of you, and it's at least you're not making a bad face in it. Sometimes it happens where
Yeah. All
where you
right.
get stuck making it awkward.
Okay. All right. So when I got out of school, I got into sales, commission sales. So I never really worked for anyone on a salary. I was always on a commission basis. So I was always motivated because the harder you work, the more money you have the potential of making. I ended up living in Hawaii. I got married. That first marriage, I married a pro volleyball player, and we went to Europe, and it ended up in a disaster. I won't go into that, but I ended up staying in Hawaii for about 7 years. Then I moved to Napa, Northern California, and I got into the mortgage business. My first job there was as an American Express financial planner. And then I got an offer to work as a mortgage originator. So that is my primary background. But I also, during a slow period of the mortgage business in the early 90s, I went and took the Series 6 and Series 7 license, SEC license, and I became a broker, a stockbroker. I worked for a retail company that doesn't exist anymore, AG Edwards, out of St. Louis, Missouri. But they ended up going belly up. They got bought by WAMU, and WAMU ended up collapsing. And so, anyway, but I had my own mortgage operation for about 15 years, but I have about 20 years of experience, almost 20 years in the mortgage business. Hey, Ken, mute yourself. There you go. Anyway, so that's what got me on track in terms of learning about how mortgages work, what they really are. And I knew early on that there was an issue with how this money was being created. And then I discovered late in my career that what was really happening is when I would take a loan application, I'm gathering all this information, and my job was to compile this information in a way that the underwriter was able to easily approve the loan. So I worked a lot with credit reporting agencies to correct the credit histories and what have you. So, but I realized that basically what that loan application is it's like a check. They're signing as promising to repay this loan. So they're asking for whatever, $500,000. The underwriter approves it. That has created the money. In other words, the borrower claiming that they're promising to repay it under penalty of perjury is what allows them to create that that instrument, the deed of trust. And all they do is press a button. There's never any money exchange. Even in the old days, it may not have been a button they pressed. It was a ledger entry. So there was never any money really exchanged in a mortgage. They're essentially making a loan to a dead person. So who is that dead person? The dead person is, of course, the legal name. So it got me thinking, where does that legal name come from? Well, it comes from a birth certificate. Who places that name on the birth certificate? Well, I did a lot of investigating with the California Department of Public Health and Vital Statistics and came to the conclusion that what they're doing is it's a form of conversion. They're taking, so when we're born, obviously as infants, we can't do anything. We're supposed to believe.
I'm going to interrupt you there for a second. Maybe you can check your phone and see if it has the Wi-Fi turned on so that you've got the bandwidth.
It does.
It does. It's just strange that your screen is frozen.
I'm in the back room and I can't be in the front room because my roommate is out there and he's got his thing going on. I don't want to interrupt him.
Sure. We can hear you fine. And
all right.
That picture is sufficing for now.
All right. Yeah, in the future, I may let him know. Oh, there we go. Is it working now?
It is. Suddenly you're animated.
Okay, good. Okay, so where was I? Talking about the legal name and the fact that we don't inherit a legal name from mom and dad. They don't give it to us. You inherit a surname from your father. That's automatic, whether you're male or female. You inherit that surname. Surnames always are in first position. And so if you ever see a last name labeled in first position, that's fraud. You can't have something that's last in first position. And it's a legal name as opposed to legal names, plural. It's a legal name. So first, middle, last on that document called a birth certificate is positioning. As soon as you take that last name and move it anywhere, if you put it in the middle or you put it in the first position, follow it with a comma, that's no longer the same legal name that's on that document. We're led to believe it is, but that's deception. They're putting last underneath it. But we all know what last means. Last doesn't mean first. But remember, the world is upside down. It's a satanic creation. The whole system is a satanic creation. Everything that's satanic is going to be upside down. It's going to be the exact opposite of what we think it is or what we've been taught that it is. So the legal name is created by the state. And what they're doing is they're taking the surname, which is in first position, and the two given names, which total, that's 3 names. Surname is 1 name. Your 2 given names are a total of 3 names. And if you look on a passport, which is not an ID, you will see there's a surname and it's above because sir means above. And then below it are given names, plural. So right there, you're able to differentiate a legal name from you right out of the gate. And that legal name did not pop out of mother. Mother, actually, it's usually the following day or maybe even 2 days later, the hospital administrator comes to the mother and asks for them to fill out a worksheet. That is for the certificate of birth. Now, there's 2 different kinds of birth certificates I'm aware of. There's the certificate of live birth, which is what I've shown you, Joe and Alan. There's also a certification of birth. The biggest difference is that the file date, which is the date that that document is registered and that name comes into existence. On a certification of birth, it's actually typed right in there. But because there's no live birth, there's no doctor's signature or certification. On mine, there is a doctor's certification, attendant certification is what it's called. And it states very clearly, I hereby attended this birth event and that the child was born alive at the hour, date, and place stated above. Well, that's obviously referring to me. I'm the infant. And they're talking about the child. The child was born alive. When you go up and look at line number 1, which is where the first, middle, last, that legal name is, in the left margin, it says this child. So in other words, right on that document, they're differentiating the child that was born alive from this child, which was not born alive. It's an entity, and we all know entities are not living men or women or children. So that legal name is not in existence the day that mom signs that administrative document. The hospital administrator then sends it to the registrar. And in California, they refer to it as a local registrar because of the size of California. I think there's 58 counties. They do it at the county level. So there's actually 3 dates that are on that document. 2 are dates of birth, and 1 is a date received. So the date received for filing on the document that I had, that I was given by the Department of Public Health and Vital Statistics in California, state of California, that date was July 18th, 1957. So 3 days after I was born, the local registrar, which is the LA County recorder, received that document. But they sandbagged. They did not file it that day. They waited until the 26th of July. I was born on the 15th. So why did they wait till the 26th? Well, I happened in my research to find a section of the code, California Health and Safety Code 102-400, stated that the legal name on, or the document, the birth certificate, must be filed within 10 days of the birth event. So they waited until the 11th day. Now, why would they do that? Well, I don't know for sure, but in my opinion, they perceive that as an abandoned child because mom and dad are the ones that are supposed to be responsible for making sure that document is filed properly into the registry. but they don't allow us to do that. Even if a baby, an infant, is born outside of a hospital, they require that you bring the baby down and fill out all this paperwork before it's registered. They want that baby attached to that document. And a baptismal certificate from the Catholic Church, the Pope, is essentially the same. It's a different process, but it accomplishes the same thing. It creates this legal name, which they want attached to that infant, the child. The child. This child, though, is born when it's filed into the record. Prior to that, the legal name doesn't exist at all. You exist the day you pop out of mother, but the legal name has to be processed. And the best analogy I can give you is a Walmart or a Bank of America or a Starbucks or a Jack in the Box. They all came into existence the date that they're registered with the Secretary of State. Secretary of State is the keeper of records for businesses that are corporations, partnerships, trusts, but they throw the individual in with those corporate creations as if that legal name is a corporation. Technically, it's not a licensed corporation, but it is an organized U.S. business. We've heard attorneys discussing in terms of a bankruptcy, they're referring to the legal name organization being registered. And they refer to having the name exactly as it's registered. So what we are doing, unfortunately, is we're led to believe that that legal name is us. We're taking on that persona. And if you look up what a person is, it's not a man, woman, or child. In their legal realm, a person is a corporation and it's an entity. It's a corporation, partnership, trust, or an individual. So when that birth certificate is created, it then is assigned a number. Now that number is from Social Security. We're all familiar with that 9-digit number. When that number is assigned to that legal name, who does that? Generally speaking, it's mom and dad. So mom and dad are the ones answering the questions that the Social Security Administration has, such as, is this infant a U.S. citizen? Well, in my case, what I discovered is that citizenship is not automatic. Citizenship is a political status. And the reason that's important to know is because there's another choice. We are born U.S. nationals. That is not a political status. It's based on where we're born. That's all it is. So you're either a U.S. national or you're a foreign national. If you're from Mexico, it would be a Mexican national. Canadian would be a Canadian national. So that is not, it's a status, but it's not politically based. And so citizenship and nationality are totally different animals, but we're led to believe they're the same thing. In fact, an attorney will tell you all U.S. citizens are U.S. nationals, but not all U.S. nationals are U.S. citizens. Well, that's not true. The truth is you have to change one word. All U.S. citizens were U.S. nationals, because you have to be a U.S. national before you can take on that status as a citizen. So all U.S. citizens were U.S. nationals, but not all U.S. nationals become U.S. citizens. So citizenship is just an idea. There's this thought pattern, and it's kind of funny because recently Trump has talked about doing away with the what do they call it? It's a clause in the Constitution tied to the 14th Amendment, which states that,
Due process?
well, it's the citizenship clause where it's birthright citizenship. So in other words, they're basing it on where you're born, a political status on where you're born. Well, that's totally wrong. If you go back to the United Nations Convention on Human Rights, which was initially, there were several conventions. The first one, I believe, was in the early 50s, 1952, 1953. And what they state in that convention is that everyone has a right to self-determination with regard to status. So there's two types of self-determination. There's internal self-determination and external self-determination. External self-determination is where a group of people decide that they want to form a nation. They want to form their own country and be independent. So they create this nation state and they create whatever government that they want underneath that nation state. So it could, for all intents and purposes, it could be a system that's based on cooperatives, where you don't really have a government. Each co-op has its own bank, its own form of retirement. It takes care of all of the people that are members of the co-op. It's a community where they actually help one another. We don't have that kind of a system. The system that we have is actually the exact opposite. And Andrew Carnegie, back in the early 1900s at Cambridge, I believe it was Cambridge, he introduced an experiment of co-ops. So his whole purpose was to prove that a cooperative type of government, where each co-op takes care of itself, there's no centralized government, wouldn't work. But it did work. And in fact, it worked so well that it backfired. He decided to just cancel the experiment. There's a organization called Mondragon, Mondragon, that's in the Basque region of Spain. It's in the northern, it's right up against the Alps. It's at the foothills of the Alps. And they were backed into that area by the King of Spain. Way back, I want to say this was early 1900s. And they fought, and the Spanish army could not do anything because they would roll boulders down on them. They could never get to them. So they decided to retreat, and the King of Spain said, just stay there. We won't bother you. You don't bother us. So they still exist. And they started out with a little brass lamp that they created and they produced. And they produced millions of these and sold them. And that was the first product that they had. Now they make washing machines, they make televisions, they make all kinds of electrical devices. And I even think that they're now manufacturing some kind of a vehicle. But they're also taking it as a franchise, and they've gone to Venezuela, and they're actually trying to peddle it to the people to create these co-ops. And then the co-op would have agreements with each other. So it may involve trading whatever it is that they produce, but there's no centralized government. There's no taxation. The structure itself is the management. There's no CEO that makes 1,000 times more than the janitor. You eliminate all that. and you've got a group of 25 people, and most of them are managers, and they distribute the profits in a way that give incentive even to the lowest paid worker, which the managers cannot make more than 5 times more than the lowest paid worker. So there's not this great disparity. And what they're doing is the portion of the profits, it's 10%, is distributed to everybody in equal portions as a bonus. So everyone pitches in to help increase revenue and production. The Japanese have that kind of a culture where they actually reward their employees who come up with ideas that save the company money. Same thing with a co-op. So that's an alternative system that scares the heck out of attorneys, because you don't need attorneys in that kind of a situation. So, and because these communities take care of their own, you don't need to have this massive organization like Social Security, which is a total disaster. And it was never really designed to function the way we think it is. It's so Social Security is a trust. It's a trust fund, and it's right on their website. A lot of people don't understand that, but if you go back to the Magna Carta, 1666, when they created the first formal type of government with a constitution, and they call it Parliament, that comes into play. The fact is that we are still under the crown. We're led to believe that we're an independent country, but we're not. We're not. We're tied directly. There's 3 entities that really control the whole world. The crown is the center of finance. That's where you've got the City of London, you've got the Bank of England, which is Rothschild. Rothschild, they came up with the whole banking, the idea of banking and fractional reserve banking, which of course they introduced in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act. So you've got the finance center, you've got the Vatican, which is the ultimate power of authority.
Not to say that the earlier central bank or the earlier banking institutions were probably using fractional reserve banking before our Federal Reserve, right? Or
right. But they were tied to gold and silver in the beginning, and then they realized, well, if we get rid of that gold and silver backing, that's when they could. It's like for every dollar a bank takes in assets, it can loan out 10 times that. And
yeah, I called the FDIC back in 2008 when I ran for Congress, and I was talking with them. I wanted to know, how much do you have on deposit in order to cover, banks that collapse or something. And they had, they only had $42 million in their coffer, which is like, fathom. It just blows your mind. It's like, they're going to need an act of Congress to really bail something out.
Yeah.
And then I asked about the federal, what you call the reserve requirement. And they said it was a sliding scale, that the first $42 million a bank issues out in loans, there's zero requirement for reserves, which I was, it's like, so now my way of looking at it is a brand new bank can issue, well, that may have changed over time. They may have different things. That 2008 is a long time ago, but um, that you get a bank charter to get operational, it sounds like you can issue $42 million worth of loans, and then through interbank lending, you essentially borrow from the banks that customer writes checks to.
Hmm. That's correct. So this system of banking is really what is the foundation for this entire fraudulent construct. So where they're able to tap in to that trust, which has a tremendous amount of reserves in it, that's where the money is coming from that motivates these these actors, these government actors, to do the things that they're doing. But they're a part of it as well. They're misusing that legal name. So getting back to the Social Security Administration, 1968 is when my mother and father had a number assigned to that name. Now, how did I find that out? I don't have the Numident record, but Social Security did tell me that I believe it was August of 1968 was when that number was first assigned to that legal name. Well, when someone asks you, what's your social security number? It's not yours.
That's just to look at the timeline. I'm looking at your birth certificate uh,
Mm-hmm.
that you sent me, and you're talking about 1968. 1968, and you were born in 1957.
Right. 11
Yeah,
years. I was 11 years old when my mom and dad first got a social security number. Now, I don't know why they waited that long, other than the fact that my dad was probably filing taxes and didn't realize, hey, you can write off the dependents that you have. Or it's possible, I haven't really looked into the laws. Maybe it was around that time that Social Security and the IRS, which, by the way, the IRS created Social Security. The Internal Revenue Service, which was called something else, originally, I forget, the Department of Revenue, I think is what it was initially. They actually created Social Security after the bankruptcy. And it was designed as a means to supplement the income of people that were struggling to get back on their feet. And it turned into a, a system whereby all this money that flows in, and there's billions of dollars that flow into that from, where is that coming from? It comes from paychecks, and it'll show up on a paycheck check as FICA, which is basically, it's an insurance program. And one of the reasons I think that they're trying to find ways to take especially older people out of the picture, in other words, get rid of us, is so that they don't have to pay those retirement benefits that most of those people paid into their entire life. And so getting back to the information that Social Security gets, there's two things that they have in their system that are not correct. One is the date of birth, the legal name's date of birth, which is, in my case, July 26, 1957. They've got the biological date of birth. They have my date of birth because mom and dad gave them that date of birth. And of course, I didn't figure this out until I was in my late 50s, when I first started to see that biological date of birth is not the date of birth of that legal name. And I stared at that document for a long, long time before it finally occurred to me that file date was so important, that legal name didn't exist until that document was filed. And what allowed me to see that was, as a businessman, I knew when I created a company, that company is a legal name. Pacific American Financial Group was the name of the company that I created. And I had to register that with the Secretary of State. So it came into existence the day that stamp came down on that document and that corporation or business was created. So it got me thinking, well, wait a minute, if the individual's in the same category, the only difference is it's being registered by the county registrar, in my case, which is when it comes into existence. So I immediately realized that date of birth that I gave to the DMV way back in 1973, when I was 16 years old, was my biological date of birth. I lied. And then I signed it under penalty of perjury. Unintentionally, right. So that's what perjury is, only when you intentionally lie. So what that means is it's legal to lie as long as you don't do it intentionally. But it is still unlawful, especially in the eyes of our Creator. We're not supposed to be lying. We're supposed to be telling the truth. Now, attorneys, on the other hand, are trained liars. They have to be. In order for this system to thrive like it is or has been, they have to convince everyone, first of all, that they have a purpose, that we need to have them, and that we're supposed to take on that persona of that legal name and give our biological date of birth to it, to the DMV. But now that I know I lied, guess what happens? That card is now, it constitutes a felony because I know I lied to get it. So now I've approached the DMV and said, hey, I need you to correct the date of birth that you have in your records. It's wrong. And one of the documents I sent you, Joe, was what's called a notice of disqualification from the Department of Motor Vehicles in Nevada. And if you look at 483 NRS's Nevada Revised Statutes 483.550, if you're convicted of driving without a driver's license, there's one of two things that you have to be able to produce to the court to satisfy the conviction. So one of them is pretty obvious: a driver's license, a valid driver's license, can be from any state, they don't care, or a notice of disqualification from the department. I was able to get one of those. They gave that to me because I submitted an application that had the file registration date on it. And the DMV worker said to me, what, you don't even know your own date of birth? I said, no, I know my date of birth. You've got my date of birth in your system. And it was a cop that put it in there. A cop that pulled me over. I had my passport, which has a surname and given names. He converted it into a legal name. He called the state of California because I surrendered that. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I surrendered that card in 2005. And it's ironic how it happened. You asked me what started me on this path. Originally, I was researching income tax because I was making a lot of money as a mortgage broker, and that garners the attention of the tax authorities. So I didn't like having to file and pay taxes. I had accountants, and I paid these accountants good money to make sure I didn't get in trouble. But I got in trouble anyway. So, yeah, I followed their advice. And one of them was an attorney. They both showed up at the administrative hearing, which they told me hands down, we've got all the documentation. You did everything properly. You're going to get your money back. So I paid $127,000 to the IRS. And when I showed up in San Francisco at the hearing, the judge just said, well, I've reviewed everything and our ruling stands. And of course, these two attorneys, I'm like elbowing them, stand up, say something. And they're like, there's nothing we can do. So I stood up and I said, what gives you the authority to make a ruling like that when you're basically ignoring all the evidence that these two guys charged me $15,000 to prepare, and I paid the IRS $127,000 on top of that, and all you have to do is say the ruling stands? You don't have to support that? He said, that's correct. I said, what gives you the right to do that? He held up the tax return and he pointed right at the signature. He said, your signature right here, Mr. Herrick. And my response was, well, then I'm never signing another one of those documents. That's the last tax return you're ever going to see from me. And both of those attorneys got up and bolted for the exit. And the bailiff started coming. There was a bailiff in the room. He started coming towards me because the judge, I said a few words that I won't repeat here. And he took that personally. I didn't threaten him. I said, I'm not ever going to participate in this scheme that you're running. It's a scam. So, but I had no idea at that point how they were getting away with that. And they weren't really getting away with it. I was voluntarily submitting a tax return. So I wrote a paper back in 2014 that's titled Everything in Commerce is Fictional, including that legal name you think is you. And in that paper, I mentioned it several times. Everything is voluntary. Everything is voluntary. So Alan concurs with me on that, and that still holds true. Everything is voluntary in this world. Everything. We're voluntarily going into that DMV. We don't know that we don't have to do that. There are some people that have never gone in there. And if they get pulled over, I've heard of more than one instance where they just let him go. Because he said, I've never had one. I don't even have a social security number. I don't have a passport. I have nothing. What are you going to do then? See, they have to be able to identify you in their system. And the DMV is the first time you ever use that birth certificate and that legal name. I should say misuse it. And so they're using that information that's in the DMV database to create a credit profile. This is where I realized, hey, the credit reporting bureaus have the wrong date of birth. I tried to get the DMV to correct it, and they told me no. That stands. They wouldn't even argue at all. They just said, no, we cannot change it. I said, I'm not asking you to change it. I'm telling you, you have to correct it. It's fraud. So you've got fraudulent information in your database, and your rules say that any employee of the Department of Motor Vehicles that becomes aware of fraudulent information or incorrect data, personal data, that they have in their database has a duty and obligation to either correct it or purge it. That's in the California DMV handbook. That's that all employees. It doesn't say just the manager or the commissioner, no, or the director. It's any employee. Well, they're obviously not following that rule. And the reason being is because there's attorneys that are telling them, you do not remove that information. That information stays in there. And I talked to the California DMV as little as last week and had a conversation. The DMV employees seem to be better trained now, at least in California. And but at the level in which I was talking to this woman, she admitted to me, that's over my pay grade. I'm going to have you talk to a supervisor because I can't. She kept saying, change anything. I can't change anything. I said, I'm not asking you to change it. I'm asking you to correct it. It's incorrect. And she said, okay, I'm going to let you talk to a supervisor. So she said, she put me on hold, but she came back and she said, we have 4 supervisors. They're all busy right now. But I set an appointment for one of those 4 to call you back at 4:30. And this was about 1 in the afternoon. I said, okay, I'll be waiting for their call. Well, 4:30 came and went. And around 4:50, I called and someone picked up. It was not a manager. And so I got the same kind of, this is over my pay grade. I'm going to put in for a manager to call you, a supervisor, tomorrow. So you'll get a text before they call you. So I didn't get a text, though. I just got a phone call. And I was on the phone with this woman. I recorded it for about 45 minutes. She put me on hold a couple of times, and she told me essentially the same thing. She brought up in 2002, she said, you renewed your driver's license. I said, okay, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I didn't know about the fact that I was lying when I renewed it, though. She said, yeah, but did you use that card? I said, what do you mean use it? Is driving a car using that driver's license? She said, yes. If you drive the car, if you use that card for anything, we have to leave that information in there, which is ridiculous. I tried to explain to her that it's a contract. It has a start date and an expiration date. It expired in 2006. There's no more contract. And you're keeping what I can prove is fraudulent information in there. Your DMV director is going to be held liable. And I said, then I brought up the fact that on March 10th of this year, I went to the U.S. Passport Agency in Los Angeles with an application, a DS-11 form, that had the file registration date as the legal name's date of birth. That's on page 1. I also put zeros where social security number is supposed to go. So the person that was at the window initially questioned why I didn't have a social security number. And I said, oh, well, there's a letter attached to that explaining to you, I do not have a social security number. The legal name may have one, but I don't have one. And I'm certainly not going to use it on this document because Social Security clearly states never use this number for identification. So what are we doing at the DMV? They won't give you a driver's license or an ID unless you give them that number. Why is that number so important? This is where that trust comes into play, because that number is crucial to them being able to create a bond. And the bond that they create generates revenue for whatever agency it may be. And so if they're taking you into custody, they will oftentimes ask for that number. Well, when I'm taken into custody now, I don't give them that number, even though they may have it in the system already. And in fact, they do have it, but when I say I don't know, they can't use it. They need me to give it to them, even though they have it. So what does that tell you? You have to voluntarily give a number to them that they already have, and they use it as a confirmation. Oh yeah, well that must be him then. So when I said
kind of like a PIN code that we use these days for credit card transactions or
yeah, and oftentimes they'll say, oh, all we need is the last 4 digits. So in any event, at the passport agency, I told the gentleman, I've never been issued a social security number. And that's the truth. What was issued that number? The legal name. So that number is not my number. Social Security will tell you that's our number. We're giving it to you to use with a legal name. What does Social Security do? They do one thing. Their role is to dole out benefits. They give away money. Okay? So if it's tied to that legal name, my brain made that link and said, well, then the legal name is only for one purpose. It's for benefits. For who? The beneficiary. Who is the beneficiary, though? It's the legal name. So when we're misusing that legal name, we're losing control of that name. And the DMV is the first time we ever do that. Then we continue to do it throughout our life. And so to get credit, you've got to put that on what? The loan application. So where is that money really coming from when they fund that loan? When they hit that button and electronically fund that loan, where is that money coming from? Well, there's a huge trust fund. And that's where they're getting that money. It's connected to the legal name and that social security number. So it happens all behind the scenes. We're not involved in it, but the U.S. Treasury is, and so is the Federal Reserve, and so is the SEC. They're trading these bonds on the international market, but this is happening at a high level. The people that are buying and selling these bonds are not your average Joe. We're talking about Saudi princes, the same people or families that are buying these mortgage-backed securities, which they bundle these loans together and they sell them in what's called the secondary market. And they sell them and sell them and sell them over and over again. Every time they sell them, they're generating revenue for the broker, whoever's involved in that transaction. So I won't get into the intricacies of mortgages because that's just one facet of their whole system. And of course, then it comes into play is, do you really own the home that you're living in? Even when you pay off that mortgage debt, you still have to pay taxes. Why? It's now come to light that property taxes, there's been a lot of abuse by the appraisers, the assessors in these states. And in Texas, there's a guy named, his name escapes me now. He looks kind of like Homer Simpson. I can't remember his name now. But anyway, he's actually brought a suit against the state of Texas and these counties, and he won. He won in a state court. He won. He's taken it to federal court now, and he's trying to get the laws changed to eliminate property tax altogether. And they've been overcharging the people that live in that county that have property. They've been overcharging them for decades. They owe those people billions of dollars.
Was it
And the
Eddie
county-
Craig?
No, I can't.
Eddie Craig was on my show. And then what's the other guy that he works with? Randy Kelton?
Yeah.
No.
Can
Those
I
guys
jump in
from
here for a moment?
Yeah, you can.
Right.
I can't hear you though. Just
Oh,
barely.
here we go again, huh?
Go
Here we
ahead.
go again. Can you hear
But
me
you
now?
guys can hear him fine.
Yeah, I can hear him. Ken, can you do a search and find out who that guy's name is in Texas?
Well, hold up. The property tax value is not the issue. The issue here is all debts are an obligation of the legal name that the state of created. See, you're
I know, but what I'm trying to do is express the fact that everything in that legal realm is fraud, and that includes property taxes. My point being, you don't own that property. An individual cannot own property. Entities can own property. So
all debts are an obligation of the state-created legal name. That legal organization name, using the biological state, is actually a defective instrument. You cannot use a date that precedes the creation of an organization. And we spoke about anti-dating. Well, what you have going on here that's even worse is personage under Trump's own executive order. Under Trump's own
we're having a hard time understanding you. There's feedback of some kind, distortion.
Is that better?
A
No.
little bit. There's something in the background that's like feedback.
Well, I don't have anything going on here, so.
Well, it's probably the location of the microphone. It's getting feedback from something.
Okay, is that better? Is that better? Is that better?
Well, we're still hearing it's in the background there, but go ahead.
We can make out what you're saying, but it's rough.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So all of the instruments that they're using are considered defective instruments. They're using a biological date with a picture by the state of. Okay, I'm being muted and unmuted.
Yeah, I did that. Sorry. I was just trying to do everybody else to see if it was something.
All right. So they're all defective instruments. Since Doug and I connected, I've done an immense amount of research. And before we connected, my research involved the fact that these birth certificates and legal names should have never existed in our lives in the first place. They should have never existed. Take it back to Edward Mendel House, who appointed the original Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve in 1913. And the whole plan of the pledging of biological property under the law merchant, under the scheme of secured transactions, the creating of these securities, okay? But the way the system is set right now, every instrument they're using is a defective instrument, hands down. There's no if, and, or but about it. It's fraud upon fraud. Legal names were created by fraud, for fraud, to commit more fraud. And that is what you have currently going on today. There's just no debate about it. It's not fringe. It is absolute fact in your face. And Doug bringing that file date out is what's revealed the fact that these are defective instruments. The driver's license is a defective instrument. In the Department of Homeland Security's own language, it says they must use the person's date of birth. Well, a person is that legal name.
And who tells them that they have to do that?
So I went to the DMV. Said, hey, come to my attention. I've got it recorded. And I first I nail them down. Okay, it's what I want people to realize. You first must nail them down. Okay, anytime you ever have a conversation with any of these corporate actors, and what's your name, what's your date of birth, the favorite thing a cop likes to say to you.
Maybe we should switch to your other mic. The other.
I don't have another mic. I mean,
We were hearing you through something else because we tapped on it. We didn't hear anything.
No, that was because the phone was still on. I realized the phone was still open to Telegram, and I shut that down.
Oh, but we're not on Telegram. This is totally separate from Telegram.
Man, I don't know. Hold on, let me see.
Well, we'll just carry on. Maybe it has something
go
to do
ahead.
with the echo cancellation or something. If you turn that off, maybe, then we'll just be careful not to.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was it's my graphics card. It was set on a different setting with the graphics card.
Oh yeah,
So,
I've had problems with that too. My darn NVIDIA.
Yeah,
that's exactly. Yeah, that's what it was.
Much better. Much better.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
here comes little terror. We're in trouble. Please don't come in here right now. Please go back outside and play. Please. Okay, go ahead. No negotiating with a 5-year-old. You got to be careful. All right. These being defective instruments, the whole system is predicated upon a mass fraud that anyone can call out. Okay, I'm at the DMV, and
Working there. You were working there.
No. I went in there and I said, "Hey, is that a legal name on the driver's license from the birth certificate?" They wholeheartedly agreed. Okay. And I said, "Well, it's come to my attention that the legal name wasn't created the day I was born." Thank you, Douglas. And mine's July 17th. Legal name was created July 27th. I said, so under the penalty of perjury, I've committed perjury. I mean, I'm standing there at the counter. I've committed perjury to get this driver's license. What are we going to? It's actually a real ID because I'm playing the game. All right. Douglas thinks it's a dangerous game, but I'm like, no, we're going to play the game because if you don't have one, you can't make an issue of it. Because the DMV should be shut down. They should truly be shut down for the fraud that they're committing. Okay. And it's going to take a mass amount of people coming to terms with what they're seeing. Joe, have you pulled your birth certificate out and looked at?
It's right over here. I can tell you. I tell you that I observed. I did observe that there's a secondary date, if not a third, because I did my name registration with the USPTO, and on that thing it talks about when I started using the name in commerce, and that wasn't my birth date, but it was about 5 or 10 days after, something like that. And here's the really weird thing, is that my name that I have now is an adopted name, which is registered with them. So they're not referring to my name back then, because it didn't exist even when the birth certificate had my date of birth on it. So he's doing that. I'm doing all this. Alan, do you want to say anything in between?
No, not right now. No, not right now. Carry on.
Carry on, my wayward son. Well,
go ahead, Ken.
I'm going to
Ken
get
had to go.
Ken
Well,
is tending to
he had to go take care of his children. What he's about to tell you is that the DMV employees at the Florida Bureau of Motor Vehicles, I think it's called the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, told him that they had no choice, that the Department of Homeland Security requires that they use the biological date of birth on the date of birth for that legal name. So in other words, they were trying to defend themselves by saying it's not us, meaning that they're agreeing that that legal name doesn't exist the day we're born, but they're forced to have to use that biological date of birth because DHS, Department of Homeland Security, says you have to. That was
Is
their
that
response.
law? Is that in the law? Did they provide the law for
No,
them,
no.
or is it something that they just came up with?
Look, they're in violation of their own real ID statutory. All right, are we clear?
No,
Yeah.
we're getting feedback again.
Yeah, because they don't want me speaking. That's for damn sure.
Well, it might be. I'm going to mute everybody else while you're talking because I've got earphones on
How's
and
that
it
going?
better.
Okay. No man is a legal name, social security number. No man should be merged with a dead entity or the corporate fiction or the straw man or that organization name as the lawyers now use it in the Article 9 Bretton Woods bankruptcy language. That's what Douglas was referring to a little while ago, was the group of judges and lawyers on the federal level discussing uh, perfecting securities in the bankruptcy, in the Article 9 bankruptcy language. And one of them pipes up and says, and when you want to get the correct legal name and the organization name, which is a fairly new term, and one of them pipes up at the table and goes, yeah, like the state creates birth certificates. And they all went into, because they couldn't believe one of them at the table gave that out in a recorded public hearing that was released to the public. So that's very good information for people to see and hear. Um, we have a group called File Registration Date versus the Biological Date of Birth and Temporal Jurisdiction, which we won't even touch on here today, because that is the jurisdiction that
Let
overrides.
me get that. Let me get that written down. I'll put it on screen. File registration.
Are we able to do a share screen here?
Yeah,
I
but
see. I
it's
see a share
coming from
button.
your phone though, right?
No, negative. I'm on a desk.
But are you joined into us through your desk?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If I can do a share, I'll show people the group.
Yeah.
Would you like me to do
If you
that?
can, you have to hit the share button on the bottom and select the window.
Got it. Let's understand. File registration.
Hey, you're
Bam.
lit up now.
We're lit up. We're lit up. There
You
you
ready to?
go.
Are you ready to share it?
It's ready to go.
All right. There it is.
Everybody seeing that okay?
Yep.
All
We can't
right.
hear them though because I've got them muted. Because the part of the problem with this audio from you is that their speakers are catching the mic again, and it's
I got you.
bouncing back through.
I got you.
I'm going to
So
write this on the screen.
what me and Doug have done is what's called the law of necessity invocation of contra pro forentum. Okay, which is basically saying, look, any use of the biological date with a legal name is not by consent, but by the law of necessity, which overrides anything in legal land, or at least it should. We know we're dealing with a lot of corruption. We're dealing with a lot of people desperate to hold on to the malfeasance that they're committing. Because for bar attorneys that are dealing in legal names through these courts, for not telling people, hey, you're not supposed to give your date of birth for that legal name, they're now a part of the malfeasance and the fraud. And when you're giving your date of birth for that legal name, it's seen as you volunteering to be surety and debtor. But of course, nobody's disclosing that. So you have the non-disclosure. Fraud destroys everything it touches. This file date, the revelation of it, is the Achilles heel of this entire system. And let me scroll to this because this is pretty important right here in some of the documentation that's been created. All right, it's called the scale of what has been exposed. All right, and this same commingling, the same substitution of the biological date for the file registration date is the foundational mechanism behind every DL, every real ID, every social security account, every voter registration, every selective service registration, every bank account opened in the all caps name, every tax return ever filed, every court case ever brought against the all caps name, every mortgage, every debt instrument, every commercial obligation ever attached to that name. Remember, this is a name that was created by the state. See, when people are drugged into these Article 1 Admiralty military DOD courts, because that's what they are, all right, when they're dragged into those DOD courts, the state is actually charging their own creation for whatever it is they're saying. You were speeding, or you spit on the sidewalk, or you jaywalked, or you had a bag of salad, or whatever, or even a crime. And the reality of seeing how deep this fraud goes, and realizing that everyone's sitting in prison right now without an injured party, that they're commingling a biological date of birth with that state created legal name, is fraud. That's trafficking in persons under Trump's own executive order. In fact, there's two different executive orders. One that plainly calls it out, that trafficking in persons is slavery. And it is slavery. And when you realize that the true money being made behind the curtain is the creation of bonds, as Douglas was talking about. Your tax collector is creating bonds in the background. The property taxes are peanuts compared to the bonds that they're creating in the back. It's the same thing with the court cases. Your $300 fine plus court costs is peanuts compared to every docket creates another bond. Remember, docket, Admiralty, lost at sea, all of this stuff starts coming together for anybody that's done any amount of research but remains kind of confused about what's going on. That is a vessel in commerce. That's why all vessels have what? All caps names, just like all corporations have all caps in the title of their corporations. So every war funded through taxation of these commercial debtor accounts. Because when they're talking about the Article 9 Bretton Woods bankruptcy, they're talking about the debtors. Well, how are they tying a biological man to being the debtor of the state-created fictional name, the legal organization name, through that biological date of birth? That's tying the living man to a corporate fiction, the straw man, the organization name. So many different ways people have framed it, but the new term that they were started to use in, I believe it was 2001, can't make this stuff up, same year as 9/11, is organization name. That is what they use on the federal level in the Article 9 bankruptcy language. But this one fraud and one mechanism operating in every domain of life simultaneously. It's not an accident. That is an architecture. And why calling it a file registration date is itself the cover. The system did not hide the file registration date. It put it on the birth certificate in plain sight. What it did was ensure that nobody would ever be told what that date means, or that it is different from the biological date, or that the difference between those two dates is the legal distinction between the living man and the commercial fiction. By giving it a bureaucratic name,
you cut out there. You cut out there a little bit. The something between the legal man and the fiction, biological fiction. Could you repeat that?
I sure can. We'll deal with what we got to deal with here. So by giving it a bureaucratic name, file registration date, it becomes invisible. Okay, so or the difference between those two dates is the legal distinction between the living man and the commercial fiction. And by giving it a bureaucratic name, file registration date, it becomes invisible. It sounds administrative. It sounds like a filing technicality. Nobody looks at a bureaucratic label and thinks that label is the boundary line between freedom and commercial slavery. That is the genius of the concealment. The evidence was never hidden. It was labeled in a way that made it look like paperwork. Every person who ever received the birth certificate held the proof of the fraud in their hands, never knew it, because the date was called something that sounded like a clerical notation. The specific devastation of each system. The electoral system is perhaps the most immediately devastating exposure. Every election held in the United States was conducted using voter registration built on defective commercial instruments. When I tell you that every use of that legal name with a biological date is a defective instrument, this is where it really hits home. Every president elected was elected by a legal organization name registered under the incorrect dates. The entire democratic legitimacy of the federal government for the last 30 years rests on a foundation of defective commercial instruments. Nobody was ever told they were defective. That is not a small claim. That is a foundational challenge to the legitimacy of every elected office in the country. And remember, we're talking about the election in a corporate government. We're not talking about a de jure organic republic that we were told we had if we could hold on to it. The military draft is supposedly devastating in a different way. Every man drafted in Vietnam, Korea, and every conflict since World War II was drafted up all caps legal organization name that was younger than the living man on the day the draft notice was on. Remember, July 17th, well, the file date's July 27th. If using that legal name and saying on July 17th, I need to come in and do this, that, or the other. You see, the what they have created for themselves is such a massive mess. And when enough people see this, it's over. It's just truly, truly over. So the living man bled and died, and the banker debt that funded the war was serviced by the same commercial system that produced the draft notice. The living man who died in those wars were collateral, performing as commercial debtors for a banking system that financed both sides. All wars are banker wars. You probably are familiar with that, Joe and Alan. I'm sure you are. The DMV
Yeah,
exposure.
yeah,
The DMV exposure is the most legally precise. Okay, this is because Florida. I'm on Florida. Florida Statute 322.212 is a felony statute. Every DMV clerk who substitutes the biological date for the file registration date on a driver's license and whose data was transmitted to voter registration databases committed 2 felonies with 1 act. The formal public notice built in the session, because I've noticed everybody, Ron DeSantis, the Secretary of State, I've noticed everybody.
Dave
I
Kerner.
Dave Kerner, yes, sir. He will answer me. That's a whole nother show. Let me tell you right now, because I mean I have all the emails. I can show you the lack of response. And guess what?
who is Dave Kerner?
He's the director of the Florida Highway Safety Motor Vehicles here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. And what did they send me back? Consumer response. Well, that's a non-response. He opened it. I know he opened it, and it's emailed to him. I have mail suite. I have a certificate of service that shows he was served, and that's considered proper service. When you send someone an email and can prove that it was open, well, mail suite, it'll actually generate you a certificate. I have all that. I have all that evidence.
That constitutes acceptance.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. They won't answer. Look. When I tell people, look, what Douglas has exposed here, what he has handed you, the gift that he has given you, and you're not taking this to the county commissions, the city councils, the school boards, you're not taking this to everybody at every level, what is wrong with you? That's my question to you. What is wrong with you? Are you invested in this crooked, corrupted system? That's the only thing I could be left with, is that you are invested in this crooked, corrupted system that's using legal names to enslave people. Not only people, but children, our offspring. When they're enrolled in that school over there, what do they make you bring in? They make you bring in a birth certificate. And see, when me and Doug first went at it, and I said, well, wait a minute, Doug. They should well know what date they should be using. They're the one offering the driver's license. The biggest culprit of all is Social Security Administration. Those trustees over that Social Security, Scott Bessent, the people that have been trained in that Social Security Administration, they should well know what date should be used, because they know they're using a legal name. They know that's the state-created legal name. And as this starts catching up,
Well, and obviously, attorneys know. They know.
Yes. That's the malfeasance document. I have a lot of documents that I created. Unfortunately, I endured an attack on my system, which the hard drive's good, the information's good. A lot of the documentation you'll find in the file registration group here. But there's a lot of documents that you'd have to go to my personal profile to see. And I'll try to get those shifted over to the file registration group, because I've created a lot of material, a lot that Doug has been able to appreciate, and we both have used, especially the law of necessity and the invocation of contra proferentum. Because here we got the DMV telling me
What did you just say? The
the law of necessity, the implication of contra pro parentum.
what is that?
That's
Toward the
Latin.
end. Could
Implication
you?
of contra pro parentum.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
yeah, I'll
that.
show it to you.
Okay.
I will show it to you. A very powerful document that just lays it all out. When the
I
state,
emailed it to you, Joe.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah, but I don't even know the words, the two words at the end of the sentence.
Contra pro parentum.
Pro parentum. Yeah.
Yeah.
PR.
Maybe Doug should explain that word.
Well, no, go ahead. Ken is well versed on this. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but I need when this stuff gets transcribed, it has to hear it right, and so
I got you.
Doug, I want you to say that those two words,
Contra pro parentum and PROFER pro ENTEM.
Good.
Contra pro parentum,
Okay.
which is the law of necessity. In other words, out of necessity, we're being more or less forced to have to use this system because the only other option is guns and badges being used to force us to do something that we know that we don't have to do, that's voluntary. And of course, they'll use lethal force in some cases.
Yeah. So I'll bring that up on the screen here in a second. But the corporate system has multiple layers of terminology designed to prevent the understanding from forming. Calling it a file registration date instead of the birth date of the legal organization name, that is layer one. It sounds bureaucratic. It sounds like a filing technicality. It does not sound like the boundary line between a living man and a commercial fiction. Calling the all caps name your legal name, that is layer two. By calling it your name, the system implies you. Somebody's echoing real bad.
Yeah,
Everybody
and
mute
I've
up.
got everybody muted, and I'm wearing headphones, so it isn't me. Let's see.
That is pretty strange.
I'm going to mute you and unmute you. Let's see. Doug, can you give me a mic check?
Yeah, testing.
Good.
One,
Works. It works. And Alan, can you give me a mic check? Mic check.
Testing.
Okay, and I'm muting you now. All right. Let's go back to Ken.
All right, how are we looking?
It about like we were. I think there's no more echo.
Okay. So layer two is by calling the name, the system implies you and the name are the same, and you are not. A man could never be a fiction, never could be that state created organization name. And you have, I want to point out while I'm reading this, you have these administrators in these courtrooms absolutely just devastating people, holding them in contempt, berating them, uh, basically punishing them and punishing people for saying, hey, that's not my name. Just for saying that's not my name. It's the same with what Doug did in his case. Look, I'm not the defendant. The defendant is the legal name. They're using a legal name in these court systems, but they want you to come in there and admit to it, or they're going to punish you. That's terrorism. That's domestic terrorism. That's why you hear a lot of talk about all these administrators and a whole lot of cops and sheriffs going to Gitmo because they don't want to stop, even though we're putting the information right in front of them. I've served my local sheriff, Billy Woods, in Marion County, Florida. I've loaded up the official records in Marion County, Florida. Okay. And when it deals with government, you should be able to look that stuff up on the record. The invocation of contra pro parentum, the affidavit of fact. I'm just putting this stuff everywhere. In fact, another friend of mine, Sue Bosgaz, who, when I shared it with her, she was living on a military base, and literally 2 days later, the FBI showed up at her door because they would not talk to her on video. there was no conversation from that point. Later on, as her knowledge grew and she was able to see what was being introduced here to her, they came and they literally threw her off the base. They came, told her, "You got 5 hours to get off the base." Um, she said no, and the thing was, they asked for her, but the lease was in her husband's name because he's also a vet. They came back out 5 hours later with a key to the door, given to them by Corvius. Opened the door up, came in, dragged her down the stairs, assaulted her in front of her husband and her son, then arrested all of them, killed their dog, flipped their house. And guess what? All the generals got the memo. Why? Because they're getting my documentation. They're getting the memo. They know that this file registration date, fraud, and the use of these legal names and the manner in which they're being used with our biological date is fraud. The military knows. That's probably one of the biggest deals going on right now with this file registration date is the military knows. They've been informed. And what do they start doing? Calling her a sovereign citizen. So you got the military calling her a sovereign citizen, which then you have J.D. Vance on national television saying all Americans should be good sovereign citizens. And you got the cops on the street calling people sovereign citizens when they say, well, no, that's not me. That's not my name. We have such a serious divide going on over these legal names that it's a matter of national security. And we have the military generals who are being informed along with the JAGs who have been well informed with a lot of the same documentation you'll see in this file registration date group. We got a serious disconnect in this country right now with whether or not we're going to be able to live free and independent.
You're breaking up there. We got a serious disconnect.
We got a big disconnect. Yeah, we got a serious disconnect in this country as to whether or not we're going to live free and independent or as slaves to these legal names that were created by the Federal Reserve System. At the end of the day, these legal names are a construct created by the Federal Reserve, as Douglas, I believe, mentioned already. Okay? So the military is well aware of what we're talking about right now on this show. I'm talking Dumford, Miley, the JAGs. I can show you the emails. I can show you the email threads. I can show you all the information that's been sent their way. And they're just sitting on it. They're hiding all of this information in the Army Safe servers. We got serious problems if that's the way this is going to be handled.
Very good, Ken.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll definitely. I've already gone to your page, and I just have to answer the questions to get my membership going. But I'll definitely.
If I see you, you're good.
Yeah, you don't have to answer the question.
Yeah, you're good. We're already on the same page. We know where you're at. We know who you are. Then we'll get you right in there. No problem.
But you don't know my 3 birth dates.
Hey, you know what? As long as you know the difference between your date of birth and the creation of that legal names date. Because remember, there's 2 different types of birth. There's BIRTH and BRTH. They both sound the same, but they mean something totally different. Okay? But the BERTH, that birth is what? Douglas? Hit it.
I've got him muted.
That's the doc. The doc.
That's the doc. So the docket of the legal name over at their local courthouse with these lawyers, all these malfeasance, never informing anyone, hey, you shouldn't be giving your date of birth for that legal name. And you have these administrators sitting up on their high seats, wanting to punish you, hold you in contempt, send you for a competency exam because you're calling this out. And I'm just like, I'm sitting over here at my keyboard going, this is unbelievably tough to watch. And so many people that are still just have not got the memo yet. And this is so simple. This isn't some overly complicated thing. Pull the birth certificate out, look at the file registration date, and tell me what you see. But knowing that
I got here date of birth, BIRTH, and there's a file date over here that's 5 days later, and then the date issued is not until May 10th. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Let me help you with
Wait
something.
a minute, because this is a reprint, a copy. The date issued, it says May 10th, 2011.
You were adopted. You were adopted, right?
I was.
So what we found out in that research on that end is, if we got this correct, when you were adopted, that became the file registration date, because they have a secondary birth certificate in the background with your original, with your first legal name. That was
Well,
created.
I'll give you a little more
Okay,
info,
there's-
because the file date and the date of birth were back in 1965, and then I was about 5 when I was adopted. So
Copy that.
that was that would have been about 1970-ish, and I haven't seen any paperwork about that at all. But then the date issued is a 2011 date, so I must have asked for a copy of this. But that's interesting. So I might have to ask.
Who's going to have that information, Joe, is LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters. The data aggregators, which compile all this information from all the credit repositories, the credit bureaus, as well as the DMV, the Social Security Administration, all of that information is compiled into one report. And in my case, it was 3/4 of an inch thick, the paperwork I got. You're entitled to get a copy of that. And I encourage everyone to do that. Once you've corrected, I'm going to step into the correcting the date of birth with the credit bureau. This is one of the first things that I did that I don't know of anyone else that was able to do it. Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian are the 3 main bureaus. And I should correct myself. Everyone can do this, but to my knowledge, I don't know of anyone that had actually even tried to do this.
What, did
But
you forget about me? Did you forget
no,
about me over here? Wait a minute.
no, not at all. But this is back. We're talking back in 2020.
Yeah, when you first did it. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So when I was able to get them to correct that date of birth, that I realized, wow, now the data aggregators like LexisNexis that are tied into the courts, now I've got to make sure that they have that updated data. When I initially checked with both Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis, and by the way, Thomson Reuters is based in Canada, LexisNexis is based in London, City of London. So these are all Commonwealth entities. They're created as a means to function in the USA, where we are the blueprint now for the entire world. They allowed this construct to flourish, and everyone has wanted to come to the U.S. because what gives us incentive to work? Well, we make money. So they made the world of commerce an open kind of opportunity. So they didn't have that kind of opportunity potentially where they live. So they all flocked here. They had to immigrants had to come here to the new country and from the old country in Europe, whereas the largest percentage were coming from Europe. My grandparents being part of that immigration. My grandfather told me in the early 70s, we were hunting, and he told me, we're sitting on a log eating lunch. He said, they tricked us. And I said, what do you mean they tricked you? He said, they tricked us. They lied to us about what it was going to be like in the United States of America. Otherwise, I would never have moved my family. But I didn't understand what he was talking about, of course, until I started to connect all the dots here. And so it wasn't what he expected. In other words, he had more freedom where he lived, and he would have gladly stayed in Czechoslovakia, in Medzev, if he had known what it was like. But it was too late. They moved here, and they created a good life. There's no doubt about that. But the oldest son was killed in World War II. All four brothers, my uncles and my dad, all joined the military. This was the patriotic thing to do. And there's good people out there that just don't understand. Patriotism is bowing to a flag. That flag symbolizes the satanic system that was created that's taking advantage of us. There's a spiritual component here. The first two commands are, thou shalt not have other gods before me, and thou shalt not make graven images of me. Well, that one ID card is violating both of those. You're putting an image of yourself next to a name that we now know is not us, and it's essentially dead. A mortgage means a death wish. So when you get a mortgage,
A grip, a death grip.
It's a
death grip,
pledge.
yeah, it's a death pledge, and which is like you're wishing to die. Well, you're using that dead entity name, which is what they're referencing there. So it all comes back to something that's voluntary. We're taking on that persona. And now what caused me to get wrapped up in the Clark County courts was a friend of mine who had been raked over the coals by Clark County law enforcement. He has it tattooed on his forearm. His name is Quentin. And what he has tattooed is, the bearer is a United States national and not a United States citizen. Now that's an endorsement that the U.S. Department of State has on their state.gov website under Chapter 8 of the Foreign Affairs Manual, subsection 505.2, endorsements, which have over 100 different endorsements that can be put on your passport. There's two that you focus on: code 08 and code 09. 08 refers to the use of an assumed name, which is surname and given names, which is what I'm known as. They still don't identify me. The surname, remember, identifies the family that I come from. The given names are what I'm known as. That's why a passport is considered a travel document. It's not an ID. Whereas a state-issued ID/driver's license has a legal name, and it is next to your picture with a first, middle, last name. And they'll play the trick where they'll put the last name above. Well, that's a violation. The surname has to be above. The first, middle, last name have to be in order. First, middle, last. When you see a court docket, you always see that first, middle, last name in all caps. That's their creation. And what's the first thing that they want to do? They want to establish in personam jurisdiction and they ask you to state your full name, your full true name. And I asked the judge, this goes back to March 5th of 2025. There was an arraignment. So first you have the show cause hearing, then there's a preliminary hearing, which establishes whether the case has enough evidence to move forward, and the evidence is presented in court, and then the parties are supposed to argue over that. Well, then the next step is an arraignment, which I told him I don't want an attorney. I don't need an attorney. But I said, I'm not speaking for that legal name. I'm talking about myself. I have nothing to do with that legal name, that defendant. I have nothing to do with that. The judge picked up on that right away, and she just kept moving and said, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and assign an attorney, a public defender. And I said, well, they can't represent me. They can only represent that legal name. That's on the record. I got that on the record. I can speak for myself, but not for that defendant.
Did you get a copy of the transcript?
Yes, but they redacted. Most of what I said has been redacted. It's as if I wasn't even there. Because remember, when I'm saying I'm not the defendant, technically, they can't say the defendant just said that. They can remove it, and as if I wasn't there, because
it makes it hard for the transcriptionist, doesn't it?
It does, and it's probably done after the hearing.
Well, that's the thing. Usually, the judge has the gets to look at the transcript and decide if he's going to change something, or
right.
And
well, I actually brought up in that preliminary hearing that in booking, when they tried to verify, because they're going to use LexisNexis to verify the date of birth of that legal name. Well, when I looked at the booking sheet, and I believe I sent you a copy of that too, Joe. If you look where the date of birth is, you can see she put a line through what the printed date of birth was in the system. It had July 15th, 1957. She printed it out, handed it to me, and I looked at it, and I said, well, wait a minute. It says here, no hit. So you didn't get a match, did you? And she just looked at me, and I said, do you want to get a match? If you want a match, you need to use the date of birth I gave you when you asked me. I did not give you July 15th. I gave you July 26th, 1957. So she said, all right. So she goes ahead and puts in July 26th, 1957. Then she looked at me and she said, how did you do that? And I said, do what? Tell the truth? I'm telling you the truth. So she goes, give me that back. So I gave it back to her, the booking sheet. She manually drew a line through July 15th, 1957, and then above it wrote 7/26/2000. I'm sorry, 1957.
And you created this, this became.
I have a copy of it
because you corrected the record with the credit bureaus and
yes.
LexisNexis.
Yes.
And that's kind of what you suggest people do is, and you have information about that in your group. Ken, go ahead.
Hold on. Absolutely.
I really want to wrap this up within about 5 minutes or so.
So Doug,
okay.
You informed me that they do a credit check on you at the jail to ID you through TransUnion.
Yes. Well, They run it through LexisNexis, which uses TransUnion as their primary source. but they pull from all sources. But they actually had 2 dates of birth in there. I had to.
Let me end this on this. When me and Douglas connected in 22, and he informed me of the first move in correcting it with the credit bureau. All right, my brother-in-law was the sheriff of Marion County. He was the undersheriff when my son was judicially kidnapped. That's what brought me to the researching back in 08. Okay, well, it was so bad that I won't even get into it, but it's extremely bad. People don't even believe how corrupt what I went through and how it could even happen. So my son gets taken away. I don't see him for 9 years. Child support comes in, destroys my business, destroys my home, properties, everything gone. Okay, nutshell that. Me and Douglas connect. There's $30K in child support sitting there on TransUnion. I correct the date. The system cycles the correction, and it reverts the child support into exceptional payment history, which I have all the evidence of. Exceptional payment history. The debts do not belong to us. They belong to the state's created legal name. That's why they're getting all that money every year for every bond, every birth certificate bond. All the money that's being made off these bonds. All of this wealth that these people have been accumulating behind the curtain belong to us. It doesn't belong to the state. It belongs to us. The light bill, phone bills, every bill that you think is a bill, it's a statement. A statement means it's already paid. And then they want you to pay, or they'll shut your service off, or they'll take your car, or they'll take your home. The military is aware of what's going on. And if they don't step in and do their job and shut this down, then we have our answer as to where the military stands. Because we know the sheriffs are all in bed with it. They're putting people in jail for a bag of lettuce, or for jaywalking, or for a suspended license. They're in on this commingling fraud, commingling the biological date with a dead fiction created by the state. These obligations belong to that state-created legal name, not to us, under the bankruptcy. We've been under a bankruptcy since who? Lincoln. Okay, they've had us under the Trading with the Enemy Act, what? Since Lincoln, because every time it's another emergency and another emergency. And why? Why are they doing this to us? The greed of the bankers.
So let me, we're running out of time. Let me nutshell the whole thing here. Getting back to Quentin, what I did was I called the county manager's office to report the fact that he had been beaten severely by 4 guards, and then told if he told anybody that they would track him down and murder him and his family. These are COs, Clark County Detention Center guards. So I called the county manager's office and reported it to the receptionist and said, I need there to be a formal complaint that the county manager knows that this happened. This is terrorism. The next day, unbeknownst to me, the house got swatted. They took the metal screen door, the security screen door, they pulled it off with they had a Bearcat with a winch, literally pulling it off the door. So
is this the video you sent me?
No. That video was of Richard. That was 2020 and 2022. So this happened on November 5th of 2024. So Nye County took me in to custody. They never identified me. They just put handcuffs on me, threw me in the back. They actually used tie wraps because it was a SWAT team. There were at least 20 cop cars. All these long guns were pointed at my chest. Yeah, it was a big deal. But no report in any of the local media. They covered it up. And the charge was terroristic threats. They turned it around and said, I called to threaten them, claiming I was going to go down there and shoot everybody. But then it was never reported to any in Clark County either. It was all made up. The receptionist was their only witness. That's the only evidence they have. That receptionist was at the preliminary hearing, and they took me into custody on March 26th because this is all they've got.
all you
You
said,
must.
all you said was you want to take a report, and that the administrator needs to hear it, or needs to. I need to know that the administrator is going to receive this report.
Right, because the county manager reports to the 5 commissioners, and on the organizational chart, they're at the top of the heap. So I'm thinking the county manager needs to be notified, then he would do an investigation of the jail, because all the personnel for the county that work in the jail are under his purview. So what ended up happening, that hearing on the 5th, which was supposed to be an arraignment, the judge could not get me to do the things that she wanted me to do. So what ended up happening was there were 4 sidebars, and it started out with, please state your true full name. And I said, well, Your Honor, can you be a little more specific? What name are you talking about? Are you talking about a legal name? She said, yeah, your name. I said, the name on the birth certificate here? And I held up the birth certificate. She goes, yes, your name. And I said, well, ma'am, that's not my name. And I've got evidence that right here in the booking sheet shows that it has a different date of birth than I do, if you're referring to this legal name. She calls the sidebar. They go up to the bench. They come back after about 5 minutes of chatter up there. You can't hear anything because they got the white noise going on, and they turn off the microphone. So there's no feedback. Interesting note, when the microphones are on, it's red. When they're off, it's green. That is the exact opposite of when you're in Congress. The microphones are green when they're on, and they're red when they're off. Why is that? Because in court, the red means danger. You're being recorded. So that's why they're red. It's a danger signal to every one of those actors. Be careful what you're saying. It's on the record. So in essence, that arraignment never occurred because there were 4 sidebars. And then at the end, when she said, how do you plead? I said, once again, ma'am, with all due respect, if I were to take on the persona of that defendant that I know is not me, and I would be doing that by making a plea, that's called personation. That's a felony. You don't want me to commit a felony and lie in your courtroom, do you? And she threw up her hands and said, court's in recess. I want both of you in my chambers now. And they were back there for 45 minutes. Her response when she came out was, okay, that PCU phone you have, which stands for pretrial compliance unit, we're going to add an ankle monitor. You're now level 4, which is the top kind of monitoring, which is reserved usually for felons, people that are repeat offenders. So they're attacking me and putting a leash on me, basically. And she made me go down with the public defender and get that ankle monitor. So that's where that all came from. But 20 days later, 21 days, on the 26th, I came into court. She demanded I come into court, wouldn't say why. She just said, be here. And like an idiot, I showed up. And they took me into custody. They said, you need a psych exam. Totally unlawful, illegal, all against the rules. But when you're there, you're in their purview. They can pretty much do whatever they want. They grabbed me and took me into custody. I was in jail for 7 months, no bail. And they sent me to Stein Forensic Hospital, where they threatened to strap me to a chair and inject me with these drugs if I didn't voluntarily take them. They forced it. They forced a blood draw. Those are all things that are money. You cannot do that to someone, especially when you've never identified them as the defendant to begin with. So they're in trouble. But fast forward, when I got out, they should have OR'd me, own recognizance. They should have released me, but they didn't. They kept me there and said, you've got a $25,000 bail. And I'm sure they thought there's no way this old man that's on retirement can afford this. Well, I got out. I had the money, and I had a friend, fortunately, a friend of mine named Michael, who's also my pastor, who took the money to the gentleman at Hope Bail Bonds, Matt Sadler, great guy. Most people don't hold them in much high regard, but I do, because otherwise I'd probably still be sitting in a jail cell. What they do is they force you to take a deal. And they did offer me a deal, by the way. They said, we'll reduce the felony to a gross misdemeanor, but we're going to change it to a domestic violence charge, from felony telephone threats to a domestic violence, as if I hit somebody. I said, there's no domestic violence. They said, yeah, we know, but even the court acknowledged, yeah, but it's to resolve the issue. I said, so you want me to lie and say I did something I didn't do and then sign it under penalty of perjury? No, I ain't doing it. And they knew at that point they had a problem. So this all came to a head when they were trying, because I said, this attorney, I got to get rid of, I don't want an attorney. He threw me under the bus. He said I'm incompetent. So competency, when it goes to a competency hearing, the court cases stop moving. They do not move forward. So now it's under this Christy Craig judge in Department 32. Of 32 departments, it's the last one. This is a secretive court where they punish people that they can't get to take a deal. So they threw me under the bus again. This guy, John George, the attorney that they forced on the defendant, said, we need another psych exam. The judge's response, this was Nadia Krall in Department 4, her response was, he's already been deemed competent. I spent 2.5 months in that state hospital, the Stein Forensic Hospital, being tortured. They finally released me back to CCDC. I bailed out. So now I'm on a bail bond, $25,000 bail bond. And Matt Sadler, I'm making payments of $200 a month because I only had $2,500 that I could contribute. So he financed the remaining $1,250. I think it was $3,750 total. So I'm making $200 a month payments. March 25th was the competency hearing. Ken assisted me in preparing the contra proferentum. I put together a writ of mandamus. The AI helped in all of this and submitted this to the Supreme Court. And even though they claimed that they rejected the filing, I didn't show up on March 25th. I told them I've got car problems, I can't make it. I texted the attorney. He said, no problem, we made it for April 1st, rescheduled, show up then. And I said, no, I can't make it then either. Well, he freaked out. If you don't make it, that's where the threats start coming. A bench warrant's going to be issued. But what really happened? If you look at the paperwork, it appears a bench warrant was issued, but the chief presiding judge, Jerry Weiss, stepped in, obviously, and he quashed the bench warrant. And if you look at the paperwork, the next hearing is 6 months from now, and it's a show cause hearing. Wait a minute. We haven't even had an arraignment yet. There was already supposedly a show cause. They're going to start it all over again. He's going to dismiss it, and those charges go bye-bye. but they don't apply to me anyway. They never did. So they have these fictional charges and no surety. I was supposed to be the surety. And of course, I never signed any deal. So what do they do?
I've been looking at this fellow Todd Duell on LinkedIn, and he's got some interesting things where they're actually filling out 1099-A forms.
Yeah, he's been taken into custody. Here's the moral of the story. How did I escape this? I didn't show up on the 1st of April. I would have been a fool on April Fool's Day. They would have taken me into custody. That friend Michael showed up on the 25th, the week before, and he said that attorney was pacing back and forth. He was nervous. Even though he knew I wasn't going to be there, he's thinking to himself, uh-oh, I could be in trouble here. Well, when I didn't show up on the 1st, it said there was a bench warrant. I called the PCU people, that's pretrial compliance unit, the phone and the ankle monitor people, I call them. And they I said, do you show anything on your screen about a hearing on April 1st? And she goes, let me put you on hold. She had me on hold for over 15 minutes. Then she comes back and says, yeah, there's a bench warrant issued. I'm going to give you a number. Call that number and put yourself back on calendar. I didn't do that. I tried to call the number. It was the wrong number. So I just never did it. I then called Matt Fadler, the bail bondsman. I told him, hey, I didn't show up. If a warrant is out there, they're going to contact you, right? And he said, oh, yeah, they'll let us know. He says they'll forfeit the bond. Well, if you look at the paperwork, there's an intent to forfeit, but then in that space below it, nothing was forfeited. The court did not forfeit the bond. That's when the chief presiding judge got involved. And it says bench warrant issued, and the next entry is motion to strike misfiled document. Then it says it again, bench warrant. Underneath it, motion to strike misfiled document. That's the presiding judge, I'm presuming, stepped in and said, nope, you're not issuing a bench warrant. And then he created the October 1st, 2026 hearing, show cause hearing. And if you know anything about legal process, that's the first thing. When they get charges from the DA, they have a show cause hearing. And sometimes it ends right there. The judge makes a determination. No, there's not enough probable cause. Case dismissed. You're free to go if you're in custody. So,
is that the same as an arraignment?
No. It's way before the arraignment. It goes show cause, then it goes preliminary hearing, then the arraignment. Because sometimes in the preliminary hearing, it gets thrown out. Because that's when the DA actually presents the evidence to the court. The show cause hearing is just a judge looking at paperwork.
In a show cause hearing, do they ask you to plea?
No, I'm not even there. The defendant is not in a show cause hearing.
Interesting. I never had a show cause hearing in the thing in Bakersfield.
Well, you had it. It occurred, but you weren't there. If you look at the record, there's always a show cause hearing. That's the very first thing that happens. Then, if it proceeds, then they have a preliminary hearing, or they might have an identity hearing if there's some question as to whether you're the defendant. But they didn't do that. In my case, it was just a preliminary hearing at the lower court level because there was a felony and a misdemeanor. So the felony carried a 1 to 20 year sentence. The misdemeanor was 6 months to a year, 6 to 12 months. So they're two different animals. When there's a felony, the lower court binds it over to district court. And the judge I had was a judge named, or that the defendant had, Mary Kay Holtus. And if you look her name up, Holtus is spelled Holthus. Mary Kay, she is Department 18 of the district court. She was the one, it was close to 2 years ago now, a guy that was in front of her was pleading. He threw his mercy on the court and was asking her to his probation had been revoked. He trespassed somehow, but he had gotten his life together. He stopped doing drugs. He had a job. Well, she said, no, you need a lesson. You're going. And he jumped over the table and took about 5 steps running and leaped. He Superman over the bench and tackled her and was punching her. It was a violent kind of attack on her. She should never have been a judge after that. They should have retired her at that point, because now she obviously is carrying a grudge. You're presumed to be guilty in their courts now. You're not presumed innocent. You are presumed guilty until you provide evidence that you're innocent. That's the way the courts work now. So she was vindictive. This is called vindictive prosecution, not malicious. Malicious prosecution is civil. Vindictive prosecution is criminal. That's when it's a criminal type of case, and you've got the DA that's coming after me. The county manager and the DA work together. The county manager has a contract with the district court administrator, Stephen Grierson, I think is his name. And that means Grierson reports directly to Kevin Schiller. Patrick Kevin Schiller is his full name. He's the county manager. He is the one that all the commissioners look to give them guidance. But then he reports to them because they're the ones that appoint the county manager. And they're elected officials. So if you look at the organizational chart, the commissioners are at the top in a county organization. So the commissioners, Ken actually tried to call the commissioners and ask them, hey, on November 4th or November 5th, did any of you get notified of a terrorist threat occurring in your county manager's office? And they all said, no.
Yeah, as media, River of Life News media, because that's my media, River of Life News. And not only did I do that, but I called and confirmed that any of the calls coming into the county manager's office would be recorded. Well, in Douglas's case, they have zero evidence. They're claiming they don't have any recorded calls. So it's just a he said, she said. Carolina Laverde, who they got to make this claim that Douglas made this threat, well, she's disappeared. They no longer have a witness.
Well, and she never did. She never signed an affirmation. She was deposed by a cop. A cop deposed her, a cop named Pamela Perkey. And she's the one that came to the jail in Nye County on the 19th when they held me for 44 days and then released me, said I'm being released, but right into the hands of Clark County. So Pamela Perkey was supposed to be one of the witnesses. So I asked her, aren't you going to try and identify me? Who do you think I am? She said nothing. Nothing. She was silent the whole time. And it's an hour and a half ride from where I'm at to Las Vegas. And I'm talking the whole time, explaining to her everything, just in a calm voice. And so anyway, getting back to April 1st, when I found out that the court supposedly issued a warrant, and I called Matt Sadler and told him, well, call me. If you hear anything from the court, you call me immediately. So 2 days later, I'm looking at that ankle monitor and that phone, and I said, I got to get rid of this. So I'm trying to turn the phone off, and it will not go off. I'm hitting the power off button, and it just restarts and comes right back on. I had to go into the developer mode to power it down. Once I got it shut off, I just took a pair of scissors and cut off that ankle monitor, put it in one of those small USPS boxes, and sent it back to the court. I sent it back to the PCU unit, which is in the courthouse. They call it the Regional Justice Center, 200 Lewis. Been there many times. But so here's the whole moral of this is that everything is voluntary, just like Alan said. And that includes showing up in court. But I laid the foundation first. So when I didn't show up, they knew there was nothing they could do. Their hands are tied. And I think that chief presiding judge probably chewed out Nadia Krall for making the bond, the bail, $25,000. He probably said you should have OR'd him. Then they wouldn't have had to deal with the bail bond agency because they can scrub everything that's in their purview in the court records.
But they can't scrub the records of the bail bonds company.
Exactly. Allegheny Insurance, that is on the record. They cannot change that. Plus, there was money given. There was money that is accountable now. So I was still making payments. So I called Matt. Can't remember the exact day. I think it was April 25th. So it was like 3 weeks after this had happened. I called him and said, hey, I'm calling for my monthly payment. Give me a call back. I got a message from him. In fact, I was on the horn with Alan at the time. And I said, wow, I just got a message from Matt Sadler. He said he was slammed today. I'm going to call you back within the hour or in about an hour. Well, I haven't heard back from him. That was
Let me point something out. Let
the
me point
25th.
something out real quick because I know he's going to run out of time here. The very fact that Doug was booked in under the file registration date.
Under what?
The
Doug
file
was-
registration date, July 26, 1957, not my date of birth.
He was booked into the Clark County Jail Detention Center under that file registration date. That's a felony for everyone involved. Incarcerating a living man under that fictional name is personage. That's trafficking in persons. I hope like Massey's aware of this. Thomas, I can't get any response from him. I've reached out to a lot of people. Tucker Carlson, Judge Napolitano, Dan Bongino, aware. Maybe we could have another meet, Joe, and I can share with you all of the moves that I've made and focusing on nothing but file dates. I know we're talking about what's going on with Doug here and his personal experience there in Nevada. Joe
Well,
Lombardi
then
was aware.
I can also bring into play the fact that I went to Los Angeles Passport Agency and was able to get the passport using that file registration date. I did not use the biological date of birth next to that legal name on page 1. And they gave me the passport the following day. The manager said, we can't issue it right now. It's still under review. She refused to tell me what it was under review for. Well, I knew what it was. It was the 2 different dates of birth because the top of page 2 has the biological date of birth next to a surname, comma, given names. That's at the top of page 2. And I always used to wonder, why do they have the date of birth twice, because on the DMV application, there's only one place for a date of birth. And we can go then into the SS5, which also has two places for dates of birth. So the federal government is offering us the ability to be honest, whereas the state requires that we lie. So the feds are basically making the states do their dirty work. That's the way I see it.
Well, the DMVs are controlled by the Department of Homeland Security. They're the ones generating the real ID. Look, everything that they're doing. Somebody's echoing real bad. Everybody mute up. The date of this date of birth discrepancy, this misalignment, creates fraud upon fraud. Even with the digital IDs, everything that Palantir's doing, everything going on in the digital panopticon, somebody's bleeding back into the somebody's speakers are bleeding back into the feed here.
Everybody's are muted, but I'll remute them again.
So the digital panopticon that's being created via the digital IDs, real IDs, even the DHS's own language involving real ID says that it must be the date of birth of the person. They're in violation of their own creative real ID rules in the statute. This is huge. Look, anybody out there that's not talking about this file registration date, I question your intent and what is it what is it you're doing? You have all these gurus, all these people all doing so many things, but unless you're talking about this file registration date, you're really missing the Achilles heel is the takedown of this entire system. Legal names. Right? At the end of the day, in simple language, that was creates the taxpayer. The legal name creates the burden. It creates the controversy. It is what it is. And once enough people see this, there's a whole lot of people got a lot of answering to do. Because I'm telling you, Dan Bongino and Tucker Carlson, I hit them up on their Fox affiliate email informing them of this file registration date and what's going on with these legal names. Well, they were both let go from Fox like 2 days later. I don't know if one has to do with the other, but I've reached out to Tucker Carlson's own media more than once. I can show you the emails. Nothing. Silence. I don't know if he's got gatekeepers. The people that stay quiet about this, they're doing nothing but entrenching themselves in the guilt of personage in a felony by not coming out and informing the American people of what's going on in their lives. This is very serious stuff that has to be discussed. It has to get louder. It has to get to more people. How they can't ignore this. The capacity argument involved in the commingling of the biological date with the state-created legal name, that is within the realm of even the admiralty courts. All of the documentation and everything you hear me talking about for folks that listen to this later or however this works with your broadcast is in the file registration group. Okay, so everything you hear me talking about goes into depth in many documents and many posts. It's very important that when you get in that group, you go and you scroll all the way to the bottom and don't miss a thing, because otherwise you're going to start asking questions that you can already find the answer to within that file registration group. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ken. Well, it looks like we've all got some new birth dates to remember. And we're going to have to pay more attention to our birthday books for everybody else. They're going to have like 3 birth dates. I'm going to unmute you guys now. Alan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, Joe, I think you and I have a little different perspective on this because we are recognized as the owner of our legal name, which is it has become our private intellectual property. Okay, so at the end of the day, it's still everything is still voluntary consent. Okay, so we're the beneficiary of that trust that was created at birth, and we have been benefiting from that our whole lives, and we've been screwed over also. And I think the big reason we've been screwed over so much is because we have participated in their fraud, not realizing, not knowing who we are. Going with, well, this is what you have to do. You have to come into court. You have to take care of this matter, and so on and so forth, right? So with Doug, he could have saved himself a whole lot of heartache and pain, I think, in the very beginning by not participating in their fraud. So it was a little harder for him to deal with after the fact, right? But even after the fact, he stopped participating, and it has worked out just fine for him.
Very good.
And even people that are locked up, and I've gotten people out of prison under my belt, which is that's not an easy task at all, because once they kidnap you, it's a real bitch to deal with, isn't it, Doug? So
Had in my mind that I'd still be sitting in jail right now if I did not do what I did. And of course, I had to lay the groundwork in order I had to get that chief judge involved. As soon as he got involved, he became aware of it. Now it's under his purview. He had to do something. So he stepped in and said, I'm putting a stop to all this. And of course, the Supreme Court was made aware of it too, because I sent a writ of mandamus and a writ of quo warranto, which we don't have time to go through that, but maybe we can have another interview meeting, and we can go over that, the SS5, which is an important part of correcting that date of birth, because that's really where it all originated. The fraud originates within the Social Security system.
yes, but again, I think you could have saved yourself a whole lot of headache and jumping through a bunch of hoops and stuff from the very get-go, the very beginning of it all. And I've dealt with a lot of people, a lot of different people, and it just snowballs and escalates. It escalates and it snowballs when you start participating in their fraud, and it gets harder and harder and harder to deal with. But if you
remember, they took me at gunpoint, so I didn't really have a choice. But once they let me out, you're correct, because I got out on December 21st. I was only originally in jail for a little over 2 days. Then they released me, but they told me I had to go and pick up this phone. I shouldn't have done that, because I had to make an extra trip down there. I was jumping through their hoops.
I'm talking about the very, very beginning of it all. Okay. The way to knock it out.
This goes back to 2018 in Nye County when they first put that information in. You're right. You're right. And that, of course, I can't undo that. But if it weren't for that, I would not have been motivated to keep looking for information, because subsequently I found the information regarding the endorsements, and just recently was able, so they revoked the passport and they canceled my Social Security benefits, claiming that I was a convicted felon. But of course, that's not true. They lied. That's what they do. They lie. So when they revoke the passport, though, they can't undo that. So what they did was they contacted me and said, you can go get a new one now. You're free to go get a new one. Because for whatever reason, the powers that be said I could do that. So I said, okay. That's when I went to LA. And so the next meeting or whatever you call this group call that we have, I should go over that, because that's the step that you can take. And what you want to do, potentially, you need to use your driver's license in order to identify yourself, because they won't just accept the birth certificate. And by the way, TSA announced that even the real ID is not acceptable as a form of ID. Even though the real ID information was created by TSA, TSA is coming out now. The director came out and said, we don't think that that real ID is good enough. You need a passport. So they're trying to get people to get passports now, which I find very interesting. It's like they're getting people redirected from the DMV to the passport. Why? Because the DMV doesn't allow you any other option, whereas the passport does. So it keeps them out of trouble, out of hot water. But Ken is right. Everything that's tied to that DMV ID record, that everything that's created as a result of that is fraud. And the fact that they know it and they're keeping that information in there, that makes all those people at the top culpable. The governor, the director, the commissioners, all these people, when you notice them and they don't do anything, now their person becomes liable.
Great. I'd like to give Ken one more shot at anything else you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, like I said, it would probably be advantageous for us to have another round at this, Joe, and concentrate and focus mainly on the file registration date and the implications of what's going on with the commingling of the biological date with that legal name. And we can maybe touch upon a little bit of the temporal jurisdiction that most people have never heard of. They've never put this one together, and there's some eye-opening stuff that brings in 9/11. It brings in the Vatican, because these legal names are considered trust names that the Vatican has the copyright on. So when you start connecting all of this, and people know the three city-states, you got London, the Vatican, and you got U.S. Inc. And allegedly they're operating under an LLC now, and U.S. Inc. has basically been dissolved. But Trump's operating under an LLC, trying to continue on under an LLC. Everything's being pushed into the digital panopticon. That's why the real ID is not any good. These things that they're saying are no good because they want to push everything into the digital world. Well, what I can tell you about the digital world is that's the Gregorian, created by Gregory the 13th. That is temporal jurisdiction. And I'll leave it on this note. In my research, I discovered that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, decided under temporal jurisdiction they cannot hear any cases past 2002. Why 2002? And this is claiming temporal jurisdiction, the limitation of temporal jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Will not hear any cases past 2002 because they do not want 9/11 brought into their International Criminal Court. They're getting ready to let FOTSI go. The corruption of this system and what they're doing and the mannerism in which in the way that they're treating us, because as Douglas said, you don't own your home, you don't own your car, you don't own your kids under the weaponized parent portray, because that's what these legal names do. They place our offspring under the weaponized parents portray. And they're creating bonds and enriching themselves in the background. And what do we got the American people doing and the veterans doing? Falling out on the streets, having their homes taken, having their assets taken, doing whatever they want to do to anybody they want to, because they have no standing. They have no standi in judicio, because the Trading with the Enemy Act kicks in under the emergency, and You're operating under a legal name that doesn't have any constitutional rights. The man has constitutional rights, constitutionally protected rights, but that legal name doesn't. That's why you'll hear them in the Bundy deal. They told him, "Oh, you bring up the Constitution one more time, I'll hold you in contempt." The Constitution doesn't matter in this court because they're operating under these legal construct, under these legal organization names. Under what? The Article 9 Bretton Woods bankruptcy. This is no joke. And when I tell people the next round we do, I'm going to bring up all the emails and show you the military being informed of everything that we're talking about right here. People need to start making some phone calls. They need to start looking at that file registration date and realize how bad, why they're being treated so badly, and why they're just having a free for all and doing whatever they want to the holders of these legal names, because the holder just, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter, and that's shameful. That's shameful that this country has been pushed into that black hole by the Federal Reserve System that really came up with this construct in the first place.
The political system.
Well, the
political construct that we're talking about.
But it's a corporate oligarchy. It's not even a political system. It's a corporation. And get it, the corporations have CEOs, okay? They have presidents. They have the same makeup as what people would perceive as being the organic republic or the government. It's not. It's not a government. Rod Class proved this in 4 administrative rulings. They admitted they're all private contractors in North Carolina. 4 different administrators all admitted from the bench that they're private contractors. And we thought it was over in the Ron Paul days. Look what they did to Ron Paul in Orlando. That was the most criminal thing I ever witnessed in my life, where they held the delegates on the bus so they couldn't make it in there and get him on the ballot. Because what did he want to do? He wanted to end the Federal Reserve. But the one thing I never heard Ron Paul talk about, or even much of anybody ever talk about, was the disconnect of the easy evidence and provable separation from these state-created legal names via that file registration date, because it's irrefutable, undeniable, unrebuttable evidence in your face, but it's hidden in plain sight under what's called a file registration. And as I did the research, file registration date means birth date. Just like Doug was explaining to you, any corporation doesn't exist till it's filed. If I'm going to have Ken Chevrolet doesn't exist until it's filed and registered with the Secretary of State. But the registrars that are involved here, the certification of birth, okay, you have the long form, which is the Colby, the certificate of live birth, and you have that short form. Well, that certification of birth is what they mostly want you to deal with. It shouldn't even contain our biological date of birth, because the only thing on it is a legal name. It should only have the file registration date on there. It's been cleverly hidden in plain sight, right under your nose. And I can tell you about some other researchers that when I took the information Douglas gave me and shared it with them, they about fell out of their chair because it answered questions that they could never answer for themselves, that are very, very telling. These people know what's going on. They know that there is a differentiation between the legal name and a man. And they don't want us standing as a man, because a man has more rights than a corporation. You know, the word person is in the Constitution, but it was never defined at that time. Later on, it did get defined, didn't it? It was all over the news. A person is what? What is a person? It's a corporation, an organization, an individual. And they said that we're basically been pinned down so that they can gain parity with us, because the Clearfield Doctrine is very clear that corporations cannot overrule a man. So they had to put that corporate personality into play in order to level the playing field and be able to do what? Drag us through the mud, take whatever they want, do whatever they want to us. And what is it? Ignorance is no excuse. But now it's become domestic terrorism. If you stand and go, hey, that's not my name, because it's not my name. And to answer what Alan's saying, you can only control what you create. And I appreciate, that he's had success doing what he's done with trademarking or what have you. Not everyone can afford these things. Everyone can afford to look at that birth certificate and see that there's a different date for the creation of that legal name. Everyone can afford to do that, great and small, rich or poor. Everyone can afford to see that and speak out, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the masses seeing what's going on and going, "Oh hell no, we're not allowing this." And when they start pouring into county commission meetings, go, "Hey, we know what you're doing," and holding up that birth certificate, "We know what you're doing. You can't use my biological date with your state-created legal name." And in fact, you talk about being a beneficiary. Well, if you had that file registration date on a driver's license, who's going to get the bill when you go and apply, get your lights turned on, go buy a car, go buy a house?
Well, remember, there's a spiritual component here too, and our country was founded on a spiritual basis. Under under God we trust, or in God we trust. That's in the courtrooms. That's all over the place. And look what they're doing. They're turning their back on our Creator. And so this is a way of...
I think in God we is the name.
In God we trust. That's what it is.
In God.
I think it's in God we trust.
Yeah, I know. But the word trust is not part of the name of the trust. In God we is the name of the trust. And then,
okay.
And then the word trust is the I don't know. That's just that's what I always think of when I hear that.
But what I'm saying is that people in general, when they realize what they've been doing and that it's being used against them, in other words, that voluntary information you gave to the DMV was fraudulent, and they're using it against you. And you're turning your back on your Creator. You're bowing to the state, and you've created a graven image. Surrender that. You don't need that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, in God we trust is in all caps, which is dog Latin. If you're familiar with Romley Stewart, well, anything that appears in all caps is actually considered ASL and sign language according to Black's law. It's not even there. It's not even on the paper.
Right.
Anything that is written in all caps is not English. It's considered ASL. It's considered sign language. So unless you know sign language, you can't. If you are recognizing that all caps language, well, you're doing it voluntarily. But otherwise, it's not even there. It's considered not even there. And
right.
I don't know if you're familiar with Romley Stewart out of Australia, Joe.
No.
Oh, well, yes. Another part of this that you want to catch up goes back to Justinian of Rome. All roads lead to Rome. And when I say all roads lead to Rome, and when they say that, man, it never in your life would you really start to realize how true that statement is, that all roads lead to Rome. We're under Roman civil law. These are DOD military courts that they're forcing. They forced Doug into. This wasn't voluntary on his part. They had swatted him, taken him from one jail to another jail to make up a charge with no evidence of terrorism. It's a retaliation for him coming out about this file registration date, I would say, more than anything. I don't know if they were trying to protect the 4 guards that beat up Quentin. Could be, but I think more so because he's already beaten them back in Nye County, because Lombardo wouldn't even extradite Doug from the Mexican-California border when he was kidnapped there. This is
they held me 50 days in Imperial County El Centro jail. And then what happens is when you refuse to sign the extradition waiver, they take you into their court. They determined that the preponderance of evidence, the burden was met by the prosecution with a booking picture. They're saying, well, that's you. I said, of course that's you, but that doesn't say that I'm the defendant. And so that ruling had to be reversed because I sent a packet that was 3/4 of an inch thick off to the governor's office because I knew that the governor was the next step. They're the ones that make the determination, the California and Nevada governors. So they had to talk with one another, and it was determined that they lacked jurisdiction, and so therefore they were commanded by the governor of Nevada, Joe Lombardo, to have me released immediately. So I don't want to get into that story. That's another conversation altogether. But
Let's
it's a
put this
good
in
story.
perspective. Newsom is aware of the file registration date. Lombardo is aware of the file registration date. Ron DeSantis is aware of the file registration date. The military is been served hard and like multiple times on with many different documentations showing them every angle that there is no denying this, and they're just hiding it in the Army safe servers. And why this has not reached Trump's desk. I asked the question about Trump. Okay. Why is he allowing them to drag him through these admiralty courts, these DOD military courts, using his date of birth with the legal name that the state of New York created? He was born on June 14th. His file registration date was 3 days later, June 17th. I posted it up. I mean, you got to be fearless in exposing this because it's rock solid. This is the most solid thing I've ever seen come out. And these people, they truly are terrified of this truth, and for good reason, because this falls under the trafficking in persons, the two different executive orders that are out there in trafficking in persons. But the problem is the Department of Homeland Security, who's telling the DMV you have to use the biological date according to a supervisor, are the ones charged with the enforcing the trafficking in persons. It's a conundrum. Like, wait a minute, what? So it's up to the people. It's up to
there's
the people.
another problem, and we're out of time.
All right, man. Joe. All right, Joe.
Here's the thing: you're not going to be able to wake up everyone because everyone doesn't want to wake up. Okay, and be careful with with this religion and government, because religion and government is one and the same.
Yeah.
And religion and government has hurt and killed more people than anything. So be careful with using this, the religious stuff.
The way I see it, that Vatican is the one that claims to own that legal name. That's the way I see it.
And be careful with phony opposition. There's a lot of phony opposition out here, which goes back to secret society bullshit. So be careful with all that.
Look, putting the Gregorian calendar into place has killed more people than anything we've talked about today throughout history. Putting that Gregorian calendar into place, forcing it upon every conquered nation, has killed more people than you'll.
And it has to do with religion and government. Religion and government.
It has to do with time. It's not religion, it's time.
Yeah.
Okay? There's nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with what God you worship. It has to do with artificial time versus natural time. You're either going to follow the 1328 like Kodak did throughout the history of his company, which is the lunar cycle, which is the natural cycle that wait a minute, coincides with the cycle of a woman, the feminine cycle, every 28 days. Or you can we can keep following this calendar of chaos, which a calendar, after the word calend, means to run a ledger and pay a debt. You can't make this stuff up. It's
all right, guys.
That's
it for now.
Right,
okay.
Thanks for coming.
This is all right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Joe.
This show is Joe Baker's Remedy Report about bringing harmony to the world through economic innovations, health tips, increased awareness. It's brought to you by Forgiveness Capital, where we believe every individual has infinite worth, and we're always looking to do innovative things like monetizing forgiveness and building a new world economy based on that. But we've heard a lot of really interesting things here. I hope you guys all have a good time. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Bye.